Hi everyone, Ashley here and welcome to another video on my YouTube channel. Today I'm sharing how I made this tropical trifold card using a whole bunch of Lawn Fawn supplies, including some of their more newly released ones that are very tropical themed. I've made a trifold card like this before on my channel, so definitely head over to my video homepage to check out the other one that I've made. So I was really excited to make sort of what I consider the second one in the series with some new and different products and themes. So without further ado, let's get into it. I'm starting by assembling the card base, and this is a 4 1/4 by 4 1/4 square trifold card. So each panel is 4 1/4 by 4 1/4, and I did this so that it would fit into a standard size A2 envelope. So that first piece is actually measuring 9 inches by 4 1/4. Then along the 9-inch side, you score at 4 1/4 and 8 1/2. And that allows you to get those two 4 1/4 squares with a 1/2 inch, what I consider a hinge. And this hinge piece allows you to tape on your third piece, which is just a 4 1/4, 4 1/4 square piece. So I'm just adding some double-sided tape to that hinge. I'm just adding 2 strips here so I get lots of coverage. And then I'm going to add that 4 1/4, 4 1/4 square onto that hinge. And you'll see when I do that, it folds back and adds to that trifold effect. Now, this is what I'm doing because I don't have any paper that's long enough to create the entire length of the trifold. But if you do have long white paper, you could of course just cut the entire piece in one. But if you need to do it in two like this is one way to do it. And that hinge actually gets hidden behind the card. It's on the back, so you don't even end up seeing it in the final card, which is nice. Okay, so I'm just really sticking that down and folding it so that it's nice and sturdy and making sure that it's stuck well, and just cutting off any sort of excess pieces that appear once you've glued things down if they're not lined up perfectly. And once I do that, you can see that you get this beautiful trifold card where it's 3 panels that when you open it up, you get the full trifold scene. So what I'm going to do is try to make the scene sort of unified so that when it is opened up, it looks like one long scene. And here's how I'm going to do that. So I've gone ahead off camera and cut off some extra pieces that are going to be going into this scene. For each of the panels, I have a square that's 4 inches by 4 inches, which will leave a small white border around each of the squares. Then I have a hillside piece, which is cut to 4 inches and then sort of cut with a hillside die to be shorter than the piece itself. And then I have 3 grassy pieces that are cut with the Tropical Leaves Slimline border die from Lawn Fawn that are again 4 inches long. So each of those will sort of line up with these 4-inch square panels, but just add to the scene. So one of them is a hillside and one of them will be the Tropical Leaves. You'll see these pieces start to come together now as I ink them up. So for each of the background pieces, again, these are 4 by 4 inch squares, I'm just inking them up to look like a sunset sky using some worn lipstick and fossilized amber ink. I just used my ink blending tools to apply that ink in a sort of ombre effect, just mixing them together in the middle. Then I'm taking my foam ink blending tools and using the same inks to ink through these Tropical Leaf Stencils by Lawn Fawn. Now there's 2 stencils in this set that go together, so I started by inking through the first one, and then I'm just lining up the second one so that the leaves sort of align with the spaces that were left from the first stencil. And again, I'm just using the same inks to ink through here so that you get that tone-on-tone effect. So I just wanted this to be a very subtle background, and you can see when you use the same inks to ink over a background, you still see the pattern, but it is quite subtle, which I really like. Okay, so I did that for all 3 panels and set them aside. Now I'm inking up these tropical leaves. So I'm starting with just one, and I'm using 2 different shades of Distress Oxide ink, Lucky Clover and Cracked Pistachio, and that's how you get that sort of ombre effect. Again, I did that for all 3 of the leaf borders, and now I'm moving on to the hillsides. For these, I wanted them to look like dirt, so I'm using Vintage Photo and Antique Linen Distress Oxide inks with the same technique, just going back and forth and blending the 2 colors together to get that ombre effect. Now for this, I wanted there to look like there were sort of dirt splatters, so I'm using some Vintage Photo Distress Oxide ink and splattering it onto each of the pieces with some water. Again, I did that with all 3 of the hillsides. So I have all of my background pieces ready to go and I set them aside. Next, I'm working on the sentiments. So for this, I cut 3 strips of pearlescent vellum to 1/2 inch thick, and a little bit longer than the card panels themselves, so a little bit longer than 4 inches. And I'm stamping on with some black ink each of the sentiments that I want to use at a time. So I started with What a Wild Ride We're On, and for the second strip, I'm using So Glad It's With You. And for the final strip, I'm using Have a Wild Day. And all of these sentiments come from the Toucan Do It stamp set by Lawn Fawn, which I think they're really cute sentiments. With these sentiment strips, what I'm going to do is just fold them around the card panels, and you'll see me doing that in just a moment. Okay, so I have all of my panels here ready to go with all of the pieces that I've inked, and I'm going to start assembling them. So for each one, I'm just gluing on the pieces with some liquid glue, starting by gluing on the hillside onto the background, and then gluing the leaf piece onto the hillside. The important thing to note for each of these is that I'm just adding some glue kind of towards the bottom of the die cuts and not going all the way to the top, because I wanted to leave some space to sort of tuck images behind, so to have some images coming out from behind the hills or out from behind the grass. So in order to leave yourself space to do that, it's important to not glue all the way to the top, and you can always add more glue in later if you decide that you want some extra stability. Okay, so now for those sentiment strips. How I like to adhere these, because they're on vellum, I don't want to be able to see the adhesive through them, so I actually add some double-sided tape to each end, and then I tuck it around the back of the panel. So I sort of just line up the strip where I think it's nice and centered, and then I can fold each edge over, remove that release paper from the adhesive, and then stick it right down. And this allows the sentiment strip to be adhered without seeing any of the adhesive. Now the center of the strip does stick up a little bit because there's no adhesive actually in the middle of it, but I don't mind that. If it does bother you, you can always add one little extra piece of adhesive behind the words and you don't really end up seeing it. The words sort of cover it, and that kind of anchors your strip too. So you can really just do whatever you prefer, but I don't mind having them stick up a little bit. Now, as a final touch to these scenes, I cut out some tropical vines, which are another die set recently released by Lawn Fawn. I cut them out of some dark green cardstock, and then the die set also comes with these individual leaf shapes, which I cut out of some light green cardstock. And now I'm just sort of gluing them on one by one onto that vine. And I really like doing this because it adds a bit of a just extra detail, so it gives it sort of two-toned color rather than just having them all be one flat color, which I think is really a really nice detail. So again, I'm just adding a little dot of liquid glue to each leaf and then sticking the individual leaf down onto the vine. I'm going to show this for this first vine, but then I'll go ahead and do it for all the vines off camera. So I'll get all of the vines having that sort of two-toned effect with the dark vine and the light leaves. Okay, so now that all of the elements are done, it is time to start assembling each of these little mini scenes. Off camera, I did go ahead and stamp, color, and cut out a whole bunch of images from Lawn Fawn. There's a lot from their new Toucan Do It stamp set, and a few from a couple other stamp sets. If you want to see exactly which stamp sets I used, I list them all down in the description below the video, so definitely just scroll down and check that out if you are interested. I didn't show the stamping and coloring and cutting of these images on this video because I actually did them as part of a mass coloring exercise that I did the other day, where I just stamped out a whole bunch of images and colored them all at once, and then I cut them out all at once. And I have them sort of sitting off to the side in a little container, just ready to use on cards, which I do sometimes as sort of a way to kind of speed up my card making when the time comes, because obviously if you like to color these critters too, you know that it does take up quite a lot of time. So it's kind of nice to have some just ready to go. And then cards can come together fairly quickly when you don't have to take the time to color and stamp and cut all at the same time. Okay, so as you can see, I went ahead and glued all of these elements down onto all the panels in a way that I thought was cute. I just sort of laid them out in ways that I thought made a really cute little scene with lots of different critters on each panel. I also included some leaves and some little flowers, and then I can just glue each panel down to the card with some liquid glue. As you can see, because we cut those panels down to 4 inches by 4 inches, there is a little bit of a white border left around them on the trifold, which is actually quite important to make sure that the trifold folds properly. So definitely keep that in mind if you're making a card like this. Try to make your panels a little bit smaller than the size of the card base. So I'm just going to kind of zoom in on each of the panels here, and you can see how I arrange those critters, and you can see that beautiful detail coming in from the background with that tropical leaf stencil. I think that adds such a subtle but really beautiful texture. It almost looks like there's a forest in the background and you're just like slightly seeing the leaves through the sky. Another detail that I forgot to mention is that as I cut those hillsides for the background, I did try to make sure that they were continuous. So you can kind of see that they almost look like one continuous hillside going across all 3 panels, which is really nice for continuity. So that's it. That is the card for today. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did like it, please make sure to like and subscribe to my channel to see more videos, or head over to my Instagram account where I share even more cards, which is linked down in the description box below the video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!